Welcome back to the Utah CTO Show. I'm Chris, and I'm here with Brett.
Hello.
So today we have Andy Page and Patrick Cox with us. These are the co-hosts of the Design Much podcast, which was, I kind of fell into this listening to your podcast through the Product Hive Slack channel and saw Andy posting a little bit about that and listened to a few episodes. I come from a product background as well, and loved what you guys are doing. So Andy, you are product designer at Canopy, and again, co-host of the podcast. And then Patrick, you're director of product at Canopy. Welcome.
Product design.
Director of product design.
I don't want that title.
Yeah, it's a different animal, really. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us on here.
Yeah, so maybe starting out, can you guys give us kind of an idea of where you started out in your careers, what led you to Canopy, and what led you to start a podcast?
Yeah, so starting out, I did not know I was going to be a product designer. This was not my end goal. I started out my career in graphic design, actually, and transitioned into product design, and was able to kind of just learn as I went along, and eventually ended up here at Canopy, and it's been really great. While we were at Canopy, we've been talking a lot about what we think people need to know, like how people can learn about doing this job. My background comes from a very self-taught experience where I transitioned into product design by myself without any mentors, and in the company that didn't have any experience having a product designer before. So it was very difficult learning how to go about it by myself. So I thought, well, it'd be really great to have that sort of thing, to have practical learning, when you're actually starting out in this career. So we talked about that, and Patrick had a meetup going on at the time, and we talked, well, what if we had a podcast where we could just let a lot of people learn this just on the go?
We kind of both wanted to do a podcast too. I always thought it'd be fun to do a podcast just to try it out. And so we kind of thought it would be fun just to try it. And we had an idea that we could do. So that's kind of how the podcast got started. I started it. I'm not similar to Andy, but I started out my career at Moki. It was called Moki Networks when I started there. Okay. And I was like an intern. I was like new, and I just got out of college. And I didn't really know what I was doing, so I was really faking it. And so I was hitting Twitter and the internet and all kinds of stuff, learning kind of like bite-size things, about design and getting to know it that way. Because in college, they don't teach you how to do that. So, and that's where I think the idea of like sharing those things with other people was important to me. And so like through meetups and through the podcast, I thought it'd be kind of a cool way to do it, is just kind of give them small pieces at a time, more practical stuff, not theoretical stuff like you would learn in college, but like stuff you do every day. So,
do you still host your meetup? You guys still do that?
We do, maybe, sort of. It's still there. Yeah. I don't know if we're gonna renew it or not, but we started doing like a kind of a workshop with it to do kind of similar stuff, but it's kind of hard to do and schedule and all that stuff. So.
Right. So we did similarly. We were running a meetup here at Silicon Slopes. Mm-hmm. It was the Silicon Slopes developer chapter. It still kind of exists, and we have a Slack channel, but we haven't really done a whole lot with it, but it's recently anyway. We did it for about a year and a half-ish, and then it sort of fizzled. Yeah. and Brett and I were like, how do we get this knowledge still out to the people that still want to learn and listen, And so that was where we came up with, hey, let's just do a podcast. And because we were holding our meetups right here at the Silicon Slopes offices, they had a studio. And so I just peered over and said, hey, Garrett, can we just use your podcast studio? And he said, yeah, go ahead. You just have to use our producer. And so that's why we actually have a producer, is because without him, we wouldn't be able to do this, actually.
That's awesome.
And producers are great. Highly recommend.
So want to talk about, and this is sort of different for the Utah CTO Show, right? We have not had product folks on the podcast before. This is brand new for us.
Yeah, breaking new ground.
Yep. And part of it is, we like to talk about all of the challenges that engineers face. And one of the challenges, I think, if you polled engineers, would be, my product team doesn't understand what I'm trying to do, or I don't understand what my product team's doing, those kinds of things. And I know you guys run into that, and we just all do in this industry, kind of working together, product teams and engineering teams. But before we get into that, Andy, when you and I had lunch, kind of talking about what this might be, it was interesting to learn how you guys podcast. Like just hearing that you guys do it sort of differently than we do. We come into a studio and we have these professional looking mics, and Dave says it's on a budget, but like this is definitely not a budget in my mind. Like this is a full on studio, and we have a producer, and literally we just show up the first Wednesday every month and record 3 or 4 episodes, sometimes 5, and then we just push them out every week, once a week, right? And so really we're only doing this for 3 or 4 hours on once a month to do this. But just curious if you could maybe give us some insight into sort of the mechanics of what you guys do for a podcast, what you've liked about it, like what hasn't worked, what has worked. I think that would just be really interesting to kind of dig into the podcasting life.
I understand. So you want the secret sauce.
Secret sauce, please.
Yeah, so I would define this as a very scrappy podcast for sure. When we started out, we just wanted to see let's do the bare minimum we could do to just get this going, right? And if you listen to our first episode, you will definitely hear how scrappy we were for sure in terms of our audio quality. But honestly, we just went out and got some $20 Amazon mics and hooked them up to our computers and just started talking. And we also, starting out, we started by bringing individuals in and interviewing them about, what is working, what isn't working, and trying to, take out that practical advice from design and product. And so just starting out, we just wanted to just throw something out there and just see if we liked it, if we, gelled together, and if we could do something that was valuable.
So it's kind of like the minimal viable product, essentially.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It still is. I mean,
Yeah.
we still use the same mics.
Uh-huh.
They were. I think they were like 25. You're undercutting them. They weren't 20.
25 is a lot more.
Yeah, they're just like $25 little USB mics. Plug them into the machine. Got a couple. We got like audio. I can't remember what it's called.
Audio hijack, right?
Audio hijack, yeah, to record, and then I just use that free Audacity.
Yeah.
To edit, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I mean, I think it's pretty decent. I mean, I listen to your podcast or other people's podcasts. You can definitely tell that this is more professional. But but when you're driving down the road and the road sound and all that stuff and listening to podcasts on the thing, you can't tell.
You can't hear it.
Yeah, it's okay.
Dave does wonders for us, though. He can even make me sound good, so that's awesome. So it's great that you can bring your product skills to the podcast, right? It seems like you're thinking of this from the point of view of the MVP, minimal viable product. How else maybe has that product background helped with the podcast, or has it?
Yeah, I think trying to understand who our audience is really important. As designers, we're definitely always trying to gain that empathy and understand what they really need, what's most valuable for them. And that's kind of how it started out, how we decided the most valuable thing is them just learning a small, quick skill. We just tried that idea and put it out there, and gotten good feedback from that for sure. So just having that basic empathy was important, and I think was really helpful for us.
We've also, I think, constantly try to iterate on the podcast. We do 4 episodes and be like, that didn't work. We should try something else. And then we'll kind of reformat it. And I know that's probably bad. I don't know, in podcasts, whatever, you pick your plan and just go with it. But yeah, we've constantly iterated on it just to see if we can make it better. And then also to make it easier on us. This last kind of refactor of the podcast, it was more it's really hard to get people into the office, to schedule people in certain times. Scheduling is just hard. And so we decided, well, what if we just talk to each other about a topic, as us as the experts, right? We're super experts on everything. But and that's worked out really good because we can do more podcasts, and we can do them once a week, and they feel more live, So it's just another iteration of the thing that we're trying out.
So you guys record every week. You just find a room and go in there with your mics connected to your laptop's USB or something like that and just go for it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a little, at Canopy they have like a little photo studio.
Yeah.
They, Canopy does some like podcasting and some video work and stuff too, so they have like a little room. And so we'll go in there, we'll steal that, at lunch when nobody's around, and go sit in there and record. So
That's awesome, guys. What's been the best feedback that you've received from somebody, or have you received a lot of feedback? Like I know you guys have done 40 something episodes, and you must have had somebody say, "Hey, I like what you're doing," or "This sounds cool," or "You guys should change this."
Yeah, I don't know. The best feedback is, "Hey, I listened to your podcast." That's the best feedback.
So we got somebody.
No, I think we've had some good stuff. Early on we had a couple people we would record the thing and then we'd ask for feedback. People that we trusted, like Jonathan Juvenile and a couple of people, Nick, like Jordan Reading. A couple of people at the beginning, we'd shoot them the podcast. After we posted it, just like, hey, give us your feedback on that. Just to kind of help us tweak it and stuff like that. So we haven't had any really negative stuff, have we? Or do you bury that from me?
No.
He's just got that buried.
Yeah, he's like, I just never bring it up.
Well, it's fun though, right? I mean, that like Brett and I, this for us was brand new. We've never done anything even close to this, and whether we're good at talking or interviewing or any of that, like we don't feel like we're that great at it. And so, but the interesting thing was similar to what you guys are doing, and I think that we need more of this in the Valley, I guess, or here in Silicon Slopes in Utah. Though it's the sharing of the knowledge, right? Like the reason that we started the podcast was to say, we don't see a lot of really great engineering managers, like enough to fill all the positions. And there's a lot of open positions out there. 600 plus open engineering positions that we can't fill here in Utah. And so we're either outsourcing or, going out of state, right? Like you have to go all over the place to find the really good and enough engineering management. And so we thought, I bet we could find people that have done it well and can help those that are listeners potentially, right, get into that position. And so we just like to extract that from our guests. And so far it's been pretty good. Like I've had people on the street say, I listened to your podcast. One, I was first shocked that they were listening, but then two, like it actually added value. In fact, one of the guys was telling me he brings a lot of the things back to his office. Every time he listens, he finds something new and he's bringing it back into his business because it's a smaller business, right? But able to take that, and I think that to me is very rewarding. And I didn't anticipate that going into it at all.
Yeah, we've had that too. I've shared your podcast.
Well, there you go.
With people at Canopy already.
Well, thank you.
Like, hey, engineers, did you know this?
Tell them to give us a 5-star rating too.
Yeah. We're just shooting for 4.8. Is 4.8?
Yeah,
that's our goal. Ours is at 5.
Yeah,
we're realistic.
Yeah. So it's funny talking about engineers. We've talked about the podcast a lot, but a lot of the knowledge sharing, about obviously running the podcast, you've gained a lot of knowledge, probably some insight on product management and whatnot. And one of the things I'm really curious about right now, so I kind of have an engineering background, but I've recently moved into a product management role. And granted, you guys are product design, so I'm maybe conflating some things here, but more to the point, it's product experience. Sometimes working with us engineers, we spend a lot of, what's the stereotype that we're in a dark basement just talking to computers all the time? And so we don't have a lot of time to talk to normal people. But
very true.
Also, I apologize to all our listeners. But we, sometimes it's probably, there's kind of building that rapport with engineering, between product and engineering, and because I've switched that role, I'm like, how do I build a rapport with engineers? Which is funny because, before I was an engineer, but now I've seen it on the other side, right? So like, how do you guys, like, what's some advice or some insight you've gotten from the podcast or from your own experience around building that rapport between product and engineering?
Yeah, so a lot of like the themes we've had in our podcast as we've talked to a lot of individuals, a lot of things have just come out, and a lot of the things we've had is like humility is really important, I think, for both sides. We had an episode, I'm not sure which number it was, but we had a developer on, and his name is Neil Oler. He's really awesome. Shout out to him if he's listening. And he wanted to talk about like cultivating that relationship back and forth. And what kind of came out of that episode was really interesting. It was very like, well, that relationship also like is like other relationships in your life. Like there's the 5 love languages, right? Mm-hmm. And you need to understand, both sides need to understand like how each of you communicate, how you share that love back and forth. One person might receive love or receive communication a different way than another person. So as you are working with an engineer, from the product side, you might want to understand how they like to work, how they like to communicate, and where they're coming from. If they are angry about something or they're misunderstanding you, it could be because you're doing something wrong. It could be because you're not explaining yourself well, or in a way that they might understand. So it's really having that humility first off, and then just understanding basically how they communicate. It's really big.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes it seems like too you have these situations where somebody will approach a problem with not a lot of tact, or they'll give some really direct feedback that maybe there's a lot of potential for hurt feelings or
Sure.
or some drama, and that's always going to happen. But how do you how's the best way to mitigate a situation like that where you feel like somebody's giving that direct feedback a little bit too harshly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think again that comes back to like if that person typically does that, it's how it might be how they communicate, and it may actually be like just they're not trying to offend you. This is just how they want to say like, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I understand, and I don't want to like beat around the bush or like sugarcoat. I just want to tell you what it is. Right. And so you could actually take the time to just realize, well, maybe they're not trying to like insult me. They're just trying to tell me something.
Yeah, it's just like their mode of communication. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny that when I first started my career, I was still in college and building wood products. Like I literally was working in a wood shop all day, right? And the guy that ran the company, he was a designer, industrial designer, and was just brilliant. Like one of the smartest people I've ever met. But communicating with him was extremely challenging because he just had one speed. It was go, 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 and the way he had to communicate what was in his mind was to literally draw it. He couldn't, and he had to physically build it. He couldn't communicate it vocally with me. And so the thing that I thought worked really well, similar to what you're saying, Andy, is there is a skill set sort of in between what the customer needs and what the engineering team or the creators are actually going to produce, right? And you have to sit in the middle somewhere and communicate that and figure out how a customer is going to ask for the thing that they want, and then translate that into what the engineering team or whoever's going to create it, which it does go through design and it does go through product management, things like that, right? But you sort of have to translate, and that's sort of where I think product management and sort of business analyst or sort of somebody in between, where those roles started to come about 15 years ago or I don't know, 15, maybe 20, but product management didn't even exist. Like it just wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
It was a project manager, and you sort of had to keep people in line, but there wasn't really a product team. And design was, you said you came from web design, like that's sort of where most designers came from initially was, hey, I can build a website. I got online, learned HTML, and sort of built some things, right? And that's how the web, how the kind of design and product management and the software came about, I think. Do you guys often find, though, and this is just coming from my own experience in product, but do you often find being sort of that middle person that you don't get your work done because there's just like, there's so much need to deal with humans and emotion and the human, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great if you could just sit in a room and design all day and not have to worry about dealing with humans?
I think it's hard. I think balancing, like, I would classify myself as the typical kind of dramatic designer. not like a prima donna one, but I get my feelings hurt and I get defensive, right, Andy?
That's true.
This is also on your resume, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's the tagline, the objective. No, but I think as designers, I think especially in product design or UX design, where you're working with like in our day and age, where everybody's like on a squad or a pod or whatever they call them, right? Guilds. Yeah, you're kind of on these groups where it's all mixed, right? There's different personalities, you come from different places, and so I think it's always been sort of the product designer's role to facilitate that. Like I think that's kind of the extra burden that we have to go through a little bit. I think is to try to manage all of that so we could even do our jobs correctly, because we have to balance the user need with the business need from like the product management side, and then the technical side or the technical restriction or the lack of restriction that we have to try to build something. And I think it just requires, I think really good product designers become more facilitators rather than just craftsmen on they're facilitators first, and then they go away and craft the thing and then bring it back and get feedback and go, instead of the traditional like, oh, here's a bulleted list of like when I was doing web design, it's like here's an outline of the requirements, go do it. And then you could go away and then come back later and be like, well, what do you think of this? And then it's like, yeah, sure, But I think now when you're working consistently and you're trying to release stuff to customers, you have to facilitate all of that feedback and try to like put it together. So I think that could be hard, and depending on the personality, it changes. Like I've changed teams, and I feel like I have to be a different person to do that sometimes.
So if you had to say like one nice thing about engineers, what would you say?
They're some of the smartest people I know. Like, and I'm not like lying about that. Like the smartest people I know in my life, in my career life anyway, have always been engineers. Like hands down. I just don't know how these people can get so smart.
Just born with it.
I'm just kidding.
You're welcome, Brett.
The other thing I really like is the other thing I really love working with designers is or with developers and engineers is when you present a design, there's all these things that we didn't think about. we're like present this thing. It's like, oh, here's what we did. This is awesome, right? You guys, and then it's like the next 2 hours. It's like, well, what did you think of this? Did you think of this? Did you think of this? Like, and it just continues. But that we need that because we don't look at it. We don't look at a product that way. We look at a product from an experience standpoint, not a build standpoint, which is. All that stuff is experience, but we don't think about all of those other little things and all the problems. Like the one thing I've always struggled with is like, I'll present a design. They're like, well, what happens if the server is not up? Like, what does the design do? What does the UI do? And you're like,
what's the experience then?
Yeah, does that happen? I don't think that happened. So there's all that stuff, and it's like just the amount of knowledge and foresight, and then the fact that they've built everything is always amazing to me. Like just the construction of all that. Is amazing, and they pick it up, they learn it, and see it time and time again. Like the pattern recognition of a developer engineer is amazing to me.
Thank you for recognizing my hidden genius. No. So I was telling somebody earlier today that my podcast is my vanity project. So this is really helping my ego out a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
Then we're doing our jobs.
Yeah. So one of the kind of personas that we use for our podcast product is the idea of kind of like a new entrepreneur with maybe like a side hustle. So kind of like, the podcast product you guys are producing on the side. Maybe somebody's creating a website or an app, working on a game on the side or something like that. What advice maybe would you guys have for making that happen while you're trying to do your full-time work? How do you get your side hustle up and running?
Great question. I think a lot of that is like, is like the passion behind it. Like you're not gonna do it in the first place unless you're like excited about it. And kind of like what we did, like you can just try to put something out there and test it out in the wild and see how it works. So if you have an idea, like there's no reason why you can't just try it. Especially like for ours, it's very easy. Like it's not really hard to just create a podcast and throw it out there. There's not a lot of barriers in order to do that, and a lot of like learning things that you have to do. So if there are some barriers and you're passionate about it, you can try to learn around those barriers. I think there's a lot of ways you can do that. Go look at a YouTube video and figure out how to do it, and you can. So I think just go try it and see if you like it, see if it works, and keep doing it if you like it.
And I've said this before, but there's never been a better time in the history of Utah anyway to launch a product. Like now's the time. Like there's so much money, there's investment everywhere. Like technology, the barriers have been lowered significantly, right? Like just even being able to plug in a microphone and run a podcast as easy as we're able to do generally, like it just makes it really easy. And you mentioned YouTube, like it's becoming easier and easier for designers who don't know a lot of code or any code even to get their app out without knowing any code. Like it's just turning more and more into this like environment of allowing people with great ideas or even just normal ideas like to put something out and see it work. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If you have an idea or a thought or a side hustle that you want to do, like do it. Now's the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't quit either. Like I think not that I have any side hustles that like are worth anything, but yeah, like I think sometimes people kind of give up. They have an idea, they try it, it seems a little hard. They kind of don't do. They kind of assume that you have to have all of this stuff to do it and all this overhead, and then they kind of like walk away. And I think that's bad because somebody else is going to do it. Somebody else is going to come up with that idea and do it for you.
Yep.
So.
Well, guys, this has been awesome having you here on our podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Love listening to you guys, and your podcast is great, and the things that you guys are doing is really awesome, so really appreciate it.
I'm trying.
So if somebody wants to listen to your podcast, like where can they find you? And how do they get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, so they can go to designmuch.org. That's our site, and you can just go see and just stream all the episodes you want right there. Check us out on all the major podcast platforms as well. And you can follow us on LinkedIn, I think. I think we're on LinkedIn.
Yeah, there's a LinkedIn page.
Yeah. We're on Twitter. Yeah, just search Design Much and you should find us.
Hopefully you find us. We're trying to get a taco named after Design Much at Taco Bell, right? Right, Andy?
I didn't know about this, but
This is gonna happen. It's in the works.
Hey, if you get a taco, man, I'm gonna eat that taco. I'm excited about that. We need some sort of food named after us.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but it's not a great name, like the Utah CTO Show. I don't know.
The CTO Chalupa or
CTO
something?
Chalupa. We can make that happen, right?
Yeah.
Who do you know at Taco Bell is going to get you a
I don't know.
taco?
I know Steve at the one in Lehigh. I know him.
There you go.
Maybe he'll get us in.
Awesome. So yeah, again, guys, thanks so much. And to our listeners, if you guys could go rate us, tell us how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. Any feedback. You can see us at the utahctoshow.com, as well as all the major podcast outlets. Thanks.
Thank you.